When I was an undergrad, a Chinese restaurant opened up in town. This may not immediately sound like a particularly noteworthy event, but in the small rural college town of Mackenzie, Tennessee in the late 90s, where one's dining choices were the local catfish buffet, Dairy Queen, Domino's, fried chicken from Raceway, and McDonald's, the opening of a Chinese restaurant was damn near progressive. I was, at the time, unfamiliar with Chinese cuisine and therefore gave it a try. That place ended my regular lunchtime trips to McDonald's. One of the last times I ate a meal at that McDonald's, I sat and watched a woman and her two rambunctious but polite children in a booth near the window. She had to prompt them several times to stay seated and to eat everything in their Happy Meals before playing with their prize toys. I noticed the Oldsmobile 88 and the squat, toad-shaped man who climbed out of it before she did. He stood outside a moment in his sweat-stained T-shirt and broken-billed John Deere ball cap and stared at her through the tinted glass. At last he stomped through the door, approaching the woman from behind. "We need to talk," he said, in a tone entirely too loud for that tiny space. Slamming her hand open-palmed onto the table, causing the children to give a startled jump, she turned and looked into the man's face. "What the hell do you want? Why the hell would you do this here?" "Let's go outside," he said, making his way toward the door. She, with an appeal to the children to stay in their seats, followed him. Everyone inside could hear their screams through the glass. Some people stood and left, their meals ruined by the ruckus. One child sat at the window, her face pressed flat and her hands leaving greasy prints on the glass, watching her mother outside. The little boy, with his Happy Meal prize toy still wrapped in plastic on the table, played a game of war with the salt and pepper shakers. The Chinese restaurant was a small establishment with a buffet. Stepping inside, one entered a slightly too cold space decorated by mass-produced plastic wall hangings meant to appear oriental. In the air hung the smells of pepper steak, sweet and sour chicken, sesame chicken, lo mein noodles, and the faint scent of bleach. And I loved it. To this day, I don't believe I have tasted a Chinese dish as good as the General's chicken that was served there. In later years, I wanted to be able to cook for myself those dishes I loved so much. I was so infatuated that I even read a few books on the history of Chinese cooking. Acquiring a wok and a few Chinese recipes when I was 23, I gave it a try. Why don't I remember her name? There only ever seemed to be two people working there. One man who emerged from the kitchen every few minutes to replenish something on the buffet, and the woman who greeted, took orders, worked the register, poured drinks, handed out fortune cookies, and provided conversation. It can't have been so many years that I am incapable of remembering her name. She explained that she was actually Taiwanese, and that she and her family had moved to the U.S. to open a restaurant. I often wondered what had made them choose Mackenzie, but then I would remind myself that they had my almost daily patronage, plus that of whomever I brought along, and I certainly never saw the place completely empty. She taught me to use chopsticks. The trick, she said, is getting one chopstick nestled firmly between your thumb and palm and balanced on the side of your middle finger. That chopstick remains stationary, while the second one is held like a pencil and is movable. I practiced every time I went and eventually managed to figure out how to eat rice with them. The same year I bought that wok, I was hired at Memphis Boys Town to work as what is called an overnight teacher counselor for young boys ages 7 to 11 who are admitted to the program for treatment of severe behavioral issues. Large red brick cottages built in the 1950s with gray cinder block interior walls and dull tile flooring pepper the campus. Everything that happens within those walls is captured by surveillance cameras in the upper corners of each room. There's a small jungle gym inside a large sandbox, a sand volleyball court, and a school large enough to hold all of the residents. Through the doors of that place have passed children with extreme aggression and uncontrollable anger, children who struggle with following directions, children who hate their parents for what they've done and yet love them simultaneously, and each of them wanting nothing more than to just be the child that life has not allowed them to be. I marked time in the last 7.5 years by my marriage in 2004 and the arrival of certain children to Memphis Boys Town without whom my view of the world could be considerably different. Whenever people in restaurants approach me to comment on how well I eat with chopsticks, don't laugh, it happens, I am reminded of her. When I think of my college years, amongst all of the faces of professors and fellow students, her face materializes as well. I may not remember her name now, but her younger-than-her-years face, her laugh, her confused facial expression when I would use an English word not in her vocabulary, and her patient instruction are all still there. There is no me with a pair of chopsticks in my hand. Without her, also.